Melissa, thank you for coming back for a one-on-one. And I wanted to start out with a little bit about you. And so last night when we were talking about your strengths, we used the Clifton strengths. We looked at that you're very convincing. You've got a strong sense of conviction, the ability to articulate. You've got goals, clear goals. And so where did some of that come from?
I would say I am so blessed because I was surrounded growing up with parents that were so supportive, and they gave me a lot of guidance, but they also let me be my own person and help kind of explore my own thought processes, creativity. And so they gave me the tools and kind of the framework, but they supported me in that. And so they let me be creative. They let me kind of experiment and try different things. And so it kind of, I would say it gave me the confidence to make decisions and to have passions and that I didn't have to be afraid of what those were, even if they're different than others. And so I think in the line of work I do, it's exciting because I have such an opportunity to influence a lot of people, but it's also an obligation. And so making sure that I'm being thoughtful and inclusive of others. And I think my parents and kind of the community I grew up with gave me that framework to have confidence in doing it, but also to be really intentional and thoughtful in how I'm doing it.
So talk about your role. What is it? Now we know what your title is. What do you really do?
That's great. Going back to strengths, I'm very passionate about what I do. If I'm not passionate about it, it's something that is not top of my list and my priorities. And so my goals and very much come out. My role is to really bring research and best practice innovation to education. And a lot of that is not necessarily ideation from my own, but a lot of learning from others, doing a lot of listening and seeing how different groups, different technologies, environmentalists can influence our educational spaces on research that they've done, and kind of bringing those synergies together to transform how we operate and seeing how it can influence students, teachers, the community that it serves, and really do then also follow up and make sure that what we hoped and thought actually came to fruition. And if not, how do we correct and how do we pivot to make sure that we're not constantly reiterating things that might have been a great idea, but not best in practice and implementation?
Nice. So practical theory, right?
Right.
There's actually an organization you started.
Yes.
During the pandemic.
Yes.
For this very purpose. So what was the inspiration behind starting the organization? And share the name again and what it means.
During the pandemic, we were actually touring Google's, right before the pandemic, touring Google's Austin headquarters and looking at all of the neat things that Google was doing, wanting to do some learning. And they turned to us and said, well, PBK is the largest educational firm in the country. What does the school of the future look like? And it was with that question that instead of coming up with some cool renderings or, some quick off the cuff, we took it really seriously and we said, what is the school of the future? And so we didn't put any answers to it or any constraints. And so we brought together a really diverse group of thought leaders in Austin during the pandemic safely. And we looked at what are all the different facets and attributes and categories that schools have to provide. And they have to have, equity and access to opportunities and spaces. They have to be sustainable and resilient. They have to be healthy, physical, emotional. And so as we looked at all of these different attributes, we realized there's so much that schools have to provide. Do they have the tools and resources and the information to make decisions that they and so it was with that this very diverse group said, we need to bring the research forward. There's so much research that's already out there, but people don't have the time or the access And so could we be an organization that curates it, that provides actionable strategies? And so that's when we decided to start a nonprofit, Learn, the Learning Environments Action Research Network.
Okay.
And I would say research is important and obviously the heart, but the network is equally as important. And having a network of experts that can help implement the research, but also network of school districts. As a part of the organization, we have a superintendent's advisory board, and that was very intentional because we wanted to make sure we were being relevant to the topics and the research that was, needed, but also that they had a support structure so that they could share ideas of what each other are doing in their own communities and understanding, how did you address food equity and providing safe environments for their students and all of these different topics. And so we started kind of, in Texas. We are now expanding across the country.
Oh, wow.
We've had symposiums.
Yeah.
And really, it's all research-based. No one is
Nice.
selling a
Love it.
product. No one is. It's really, we have other architects involved. We really want to make sure we're providing free access to research for districts
Nice.
across the country.
What are some of the other disciplines or roles, or who's part of this network of resources?
We have, I mentioned architects, we have technology, and we're thankful to have Google and Soft Choice, both kind of in the technology. We have furniture represented. We've had environmentalists at the Nature Conservancy and the Children in Nature Network represented. We have textiles, so we have different, flooring and fabrics. Going through, we have educators. Educators are so important at the board level. Our executive director is a former superintendent. We have researchers. So really trying to be building envelope experts. We really want to be inclusive of all different kind of disciplines so that we don't have any one vantage point being overly represented. We really want it to be much more holistic.
Nice. How do you join?
Oh, that's great. So our website is golearntoday.org. It is open to anyone. Okay. Anyone that has an interest, a passionate parent, an educator, you can sign up for the information that goes out. You have access to all of the research, podcasts, things like that. But if you would like to be, a sponsor, we encourage that too. The more people involved and the more conversation that we can bring forward, the better. We're looking to partner with, higher education and research institutes as we kind of further and develop this to make sure that we have our hands on the best and the latest research so we can transform learning environments.
Very good. So some of the outlier projects, a lot of work about the future, we tend to look at outliers. And who are some of either the districts or the schools that you've gotten inspiration from for your research?
I'll use two. Yep. One of them in San Bernardino, California. San Bernardino is very diverse, very low socioeconomic, right. And they're surrounded by such natural beauty. But unfortunately, a lot of their older schools are void of that.
Yeah,
and so they have access to outdoor environments, but they've been paved, they're hot. And so they have a wonderful team over there that is completely rethinking buildings, rethinking outdoor environments. And so they are actually tearing up pavement to start planting kind of more native trees and grasses. They're painting. Our landscape team is so fortunate to be working with them. We're painting bird migration paths and interesting kind of native patterns from the Native American tribes in the area on their existing pavement, so that even if there is pavement, it's a little bit cooler, but it's also educational, and it gives them a sense of place of where they come from, something that doesn't look like everything else, but they have pride in. And so they're just kind of embarking on this, but it's a really awesome example of taking something, and it doesn't have to be cost prohibitive, but really advancing it and enhancing it for students in that environment. So that's one.
Yeah, I can relate to, because I've been there.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, and they are very cement, brick, prison-looking kinds of buildings. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, they have a really great team. And the second one I'll mention is in kind of urban Houston. It's Alief Independent School District. Okay. Also really diverse district. It's about 37 square miles. And I think it might be the most in the state, if not the country. Very low socioeconomic. And they have really championed ahead of their time programs for their students. So they were one of the first in Texas to do the Advanced Career and Technical Education Center serving their students. We were fortunate just to finish an early childhood center for them. But what makes them unique is they're willing to take a chance on things that might not have been proven yet. And with the hope and the research that they know what the benefits will be provided. So this early childhood center serves 558 kids. And it is nestled in what became, we call it like a national park. Alief is, again, very hot, very paved. A lot of these students grow up in apartments. They don't have access to backyards or green space. And with all the research of what nature provides, especially for early childhood, giving them a space to go outside in a safe manner was really important. And so when we partnered with the district on this project, we brought a crazy idea and said, what if we restore this site that was a used car lot and a old golf course driving range into a native park? And so we partnered with the Nature Conservancy, a lot of local jurisdictions, and we restored the site to what it was probably 200 years ago. We created wetlands and pocket prairies. We added over 200 trees. And what's beautiful and why they couldn't say no is we got it all donated. There were private philanthropists, environmental organizations. Their hearts were getting kids outside, but also bird migration and cooling our ever hot city. And so it was this beautiful synergy that we could provide nature to kids that need it, but also help our city and help kind of change the conversation of what schoolyards should look like. Yeah. Schoolyards across the country, I think, all historically look the same. They shouldn't. It should be placemaking and understanding what it is to be from Houston or from San Bernardino, or from Indiana. They don't look the same. And so having a sense of pride of where you come from and what it looks like, but also for the poor, ever-burdened maintenance and operations teams, their maintenance has drastically diminished because instead of mowing and irrigating, they now have to mow for just the kind of the edges about 2 to 3 hours a week instead of over a day and a half, which they would have normally done. Yeah. So it's all of these wonderful benefits, most importantly, helping these kids have this awe and wonder of nature and see the change in the season and see bird migration and things that they might not have otherwise had the opportunity to do.
Now, when you come into a district and you've got some of these crazy ideas, or change.
Yes.
How do you help people transition from this is what we're used to, this is what we want, into being willing to do something that's risk?
I think in this case, it was a multifaceted approach.
Okay.
My first curriculum and instruction was my first stop and showing them the research about the importance of getting kids outside and having access to nature. And they bought in and they said, that sounds wonderful. I want our students to have that opportunity. So I had their buy-in. Second stop was the maintenance and operations team. Hey, this is going to look different. This is going to be this, but this is ultimately going to save you a lot of time and a lot of resources on an overly stressed and burdened department. But they had to buy in because it's very different. And we had to do trainings and things like that. And they said, but if it can save us time and ultimately money, okay, we've bought in. And then it was the community. And the community was one, they were open and ready for change, but even after the project was complete, native environments aren't always flowering and beautiful. They go dormant. There's times they look a little mangy. And so the school district initially got some questions about, when are you going to mow the lawn? And I think it was a good opportunity for them to educate the community about, you know what, actually, that it's supposed to look this way. It's native, but we're also being good neighbors. We're absorbing more water because we have these native grasses. Our neighborhood, it's actually proven now that it's cooling not only the school, but the neighborhood around it by multiple degrees.
Wow.
Because it's absorbing and carbon capture, but also heat. And so, but now there's a change in conversation, and now other schools are asking for it. Hey, can we have that? So what was once, unkempt is now the desire of the district because they're seeing the excitement. And then we put nature paths through it for the school, but also for the community, so that on the weekends they can have that conversation. And we have markers that show, by doing this, we're being good stewards with resources. We're saving this much energy. We're capturing this much water. And so we're hopefully educating in lots of different languages the community, so then they change their behavior. I can tell you it's influenced me. I ripped out half my front yard and put in native scapes because I saw if we all can start to make these micro tweaks, we can be more resilient for our city, but also enjoy the beauty of what's native and supposed to be there.
Yeah,
so.
And it's just changing a set of sensibilities about what's good, what's not. Now, so it's interesting listening to you. Last night when we went through the strengths, I think your tagline was, "I'll convince you." I think that's what it was.
Right.
Yeah, I've just experienced that.
Oh, good.
Now, I don't have to rip out anything because we have a ranch, so
perfect.
Everything's there. So early in your career, what or who shaped you to think the way you do?
I will say, again, I'm so blessed with a family that is so supportive. And so they gave me the freedom to think creatively. I'll also say my education at Rice University in Houston, they taught me a little bit about architecture, but I think they taught me a lot about creative thinking and critical thinking of asking more questions and not seeing something just at the surface value, but asking why and how does it work? And I think it starts to make facts and more real and applicable. And so I'd say educating my educators.
Yeah. Where did the focus on nature come from? Because since you've been here,
that's all I talk about.
It's all you talk about is nature. So that came from someplace.
It was actually, I think I grew up in New Mexico. We went hiking. I always had a love of nature, but I don't know that I appreciated or articulated it enough.
Okay.
But it was during the pandemic on this early childhood project that I had some friends in the industry, and we kind of virtually connected, and they said, we want to infuse nature into our schoolyards. And I said, I have an early childhood site that needs something. And they educated me on all these things I didn't know that I wish I knew, a decade ago. And they changed my thinking about stewardship and about space and about access. And I guess it makes sense. All of us go on vacations, and most of us go to, state parks. We go to the beach. We go into the mountains. And what if we didn't have to use the 2 weeks of vacation we have a year to go into nature, but it's an everyday occurrence? And how much more rest we would have and peace. Yeah. And so in designing schools, how can I bring that to schools so that they have daily peace and daily access to awe and wonder that only nature can provide, and change in season and things that are just so magnificent. And so that was really, I think I've always had a passion for it, but it probably wasn't realized until I'm trapped in front of computers on, virtual calls, craving community and craving nature. And so that has really been a huge inspiration for me and kind of changed, again, how I operate, how I parent with my kids.
Sounds like a movement you're starting.
Yeah. Well, hey, I hope so.
Well, and when you think about the way most schools are, so devoid of nature and so much concrete, and and how easy it is to make some simple changes. We visited a school for homeless in Los Angeles called Rise. And I won't get into the whole story, but one of the things that was transforming was they had a garden. And that garden was pretty much, this is in South Central LA.
Okay.
So this is not the place you want to be in the afternoon. And we dropped a whole busload of teachers and experts in the neighborhood to walk through. And I was glad we were in a fenced area. But this garden that they had, they let parents come on Fridays to bag up some of the groceries.
That's nice.
But it was so inspiring that across the street, the police department, well, down the road, they put in a garden. And then after the police put in the garden, then the church, so each one was a little bigger. So this whole community began to build a new identity around what was very simple. So I'm just tying the connection that these little things you're doing can really become a movement for you.
You know, sometimes I think you think of these areas that might have crime or be a little harder to address. We need to put up fencing. We need to keep people out. But nature is actually shown to reduce crime. And they think in some areas it's because of like urban heat, that if people are hot, they're more aggravated. And so if we can provide cooling and safer places and places people feel proud to be a part of, they are less likely to react and destroy it. And so there's parts of Houston and other places where they're looking at greening. I know even Chicago, they've looked at greening as a crime prevention strategy.
Very interesting.
So, so if we're doing that, then my goodness, like schoolyards should absolutely be these kind of parks and places for safety.
So your profile says you're very curious. You're always learning. So what are some of the new things you're curious about?
I'm curious about how, a lot of what we're talking about right now is AI, and you hear about technology and making careers obsolete and all of this. And I think what I'm curious is how can we, as a mom, as a, educational architect, how can we create spaces and environments where students are learning relevant skills so that they're prepared for the future that is rapidly changing faster than we've ever seen.
Right.
And how do we teach them to be creative? How do we give them opportunities and time to tinker and to play and to explore, to be creative? Because I think if they don't have that opportunity and they haven't worked those muscles, I worry that they're going to be lost for the future and looking. And so I think that to me is interesting. And a lot of it takes time. And with schools having, teaching to a test or having so little time for kind of exploration, how do we change that paradigm so that students are relevant and ready for the future? So that's something that's really
one of our
interesting
research groups developed a different kind of taxonomy to describe where school was. And we classified so many as what we called left behind schools. And there were two levels of that. And then we found that the majority of schools were what we called well-schooled, but poorly educated. Because teach to the test, you can get into college. What we found was only 5% of schools are what we call those future-ready schools. And I think the things you're talking about prepare kids for that future readiness.
So one is creativity, and then it is emotional awareness of how. So even if you have the creativity, how do you work well with others to collaboratively implement, an idea or a process? And so I think that's where getting out of the usual, we're going to learn math and we're going to learn English and we're going to learn, and having these kind of interdisciplinary collisions is going to be so important. And I think we're going to see it at the university level starting, because I think they sometimes start and then kind of trickles down. But, when we're looking at career and technical education, everyone, whether you're in cosmetology, automotive, should probably be learning business skills, because you're going to need it. You're going to need to understand how to run a business, how to have a client, how to curate information of what's important to those clients. And so I think it will be really interesting to see the skill sets that come out, and not just kind of trade ready or, collegiate ready, but also the kind of interpersonal skills that are going to be so important as we go forward.
Very good. One last question for you. So for you, what's your next mountain that you want to climb? What do you want to learn, master, bring into the practice, use to change the world of education?
Okay, this is something I've actually been thinking about.
Doesn't surprise me.
And I don't know how it's going to work, but we'll figure out a way. Right now, education, they have so much they're responsible for, and they don't have the resources to do it. We continue to give them more responsibilities, and they don't have the fiscal resources to do it. And so I can say in Texas, even the most affluent districts right now are laying off essential employees, librarians, math and literacy coaches, because they don't have the funds. And I think ESSER, coming out of the pandemic, really helped kind of bridge some of that gap. But what I would love is somehow to foster this relationship between kind of public-private partnerships, so that some of the private funding, philanthropy, but also educating your future workforce comes into public education. Then your community, your industries have some skin in the game, but you're also providing much needed resources to public education, so that they don't have to be so taxed and make hard decisions as kids have more and more learning differences, as they require more attention and thoughtfulness, as they should. That requires resources. And if districts don't have it, then you're missing this huge opportunity for kids that have the opportunity to thrive and can't. So I don't know how this will all work, but I would love to find ways that we can bring that money into the districts. But there is going to be a return on investment for these communities and these companies, because they're now creating a much more prepared, future. And so I don't know how that's going to come to fruition, but I would love to even be a part of it, to see how that could change public education.
Well, I love that we're ending with a vision and a challenge.
Yeah.
And so, Melissa, thank you so much
for
the conversation. I look forward to having more conversations with you.
Thanks.
And happy travels.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
You bet.